coast of the Atlantic, land of jungles, waterfalls, and sweet scenery, where poor people farm the lands and hunt the waters, and all live in peace and harmony. This is Guyana, beautiful Guyana. This is Guyana, beautiful Guyana. Diamond seekers go in the interior, pulling their creoles under the falls in sweet scenery, where poor people farm the lands and hunt the waters, and all live in peace and harmony. This is Guyana, beautiful Guyana. This is Guyana, beautiful Guyana. Diamond seekers go in the interior, pulling their creoles under the falls, singing sweet calypso as they heave on their way to dig up the diamond and the gold. Great kite tumbling to the river, how I love to see your foaming tide. I listen to the chirps of the cheerful kiskadee as they throw the yellow breast to the sky. Oh, Guyana, land where I was born. Oh, sweet land, shining in the sun. I could hear the monkey chatter up in a tree, and the parrots singing this melody. Oh, Guyana, beautiful Guyana. Oh, Guyana, independent and free.
With the voice of Hilton Hemmerdine in the background, welcoming you to Politics 101 on Independence Evening. Wherever you're joining us, whether you're joining us from Guyana or you're joining us from outside of Guyana. A little late start tonight. We're at some technical difficulties, but we have an independence program tonight. We are expecting onto the program Dr. Nigel Westmus, who's already backstage and waiting. Nigel London, Apostle Nigel London, Amanda Walton Desir, and Mr. Leland Ruknarain. They're sorting themselves out, and they should be up with us um, shortly. So please let everyone know that Politics 101 is on tonight. I see Pastor Nigel London. Apostle Nigel London is here. We are waiting on Amanza and Brother Leland to come through. And of course, it's Independence Night. I assume that persons, let me see if I get everyone all situated here. Um, it's Independence Night, and some of you might have had uh, some festivities earlier, but we're waiting. The technical difficulties is being okay. I see Amanza on, um, and I see uh, Brother Nigel is on. Well, there are two Nigels on tonight. Nigel Westmus, Dr. Nigel Westmus, um, and Apostle Nigel London. Let me bring them in right away. And let me bring them in right away because we are running a little bit late. Good evening, Brother Nigel. Good evening, Brother Nigel. And good evening, Sister Amanza Walton. Happy Independence to
Happy
you all.
Independence.
Same to you. Thank you.
At the end of the day, it is independence, Guyana's independence. Wherever we sit or wherever we are walking, Guyana belongs to all of us. We're 57 years old. In my independence message earlier today, I said we have outlived the Cold War. We have we have outlived the Berlin Wall, and we are here to tell the story in 2023. Let me go around the table here and ask each of you for your initial reflection on Independence 2023. What does it speak? What does it say to you? Or what do you think it signifies? I'll start with the lady first, Sister Manzo. Good evening and welcome after a little break to Politics 101, Independence 2023.
Thank you, Doc. Could you confirm that you are hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you
Oh,
clearly. I'm
great.
hearing you clearly.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening and happy
Good evening.
Independence.
Good evening. Happy
Happy
Independence.
Independence, and especially to my fellow Londoner, Apostle London. Always good to see you.
Same here.
Ah, initial reaction on independence today. It was quite somber for me. I personally I was not in the usual celebratory mood. It was more of introspection because I think Dr. Hines, we are at a crossroad as a nation, and I think today was a day that required collective soul searching, and I didn't see that because we have had a tragedy of tremendous proportions just happen, and for me it seems as if the nation has returned to business as usual. We've lost 19 of our young people, and for me it was a time to stop, to pause, and to really reflect on why we are where we are as a nation, the culture that supports us being at this juncture that we are, where there seems to be a lack of accountability, a lack of a willingness to call people out, a lack of a willingness to um, say right is right and wrong is wrong, irrespective of who is doing it. Um, those fundamental things that are important foundational principles for a nation. And there's a lack of that in our society today. And so today for me was one of introspection and just, moving around the community, talking to people, hearing from them and how they truly feel. So here we are today, happy that we are an independent nation, but asking myself, really, celebrating, what are we celebrating today? Because it seems to me we've come a far way as a nation, but we are not as far as we can be, and we're not as far as we ought to be given what we have as a nation. So those are just my initial reactions.
Apostle London?
Thank you so much, and greetings again to all of you. I must say that I share the sentiment of Samanza. There are three terms in relation to Guyana that whenever these are used, it bothers me. One being independent, another being a democracy, and the third being a republic. We are none. This country is by no means an independent one. And when I think about the fiasco, the 5-month neo-colonialist invasion of our society and our territory, and then the babysitter Sarah Lynch in her performance, we're not independent. We are dependent and we are reliant on a group of people who we believe, based on how we play with them, they give us what we want. I am unhappy today because in the light of us being made to celebrate independence, an irresponsible person named Irfan Ali saw it perfectly fitting to strategically give 3 days of mourning from Monday 4 p.m. to yesterday at 4 o'clock, so that we can have, beginning last night, Stinging Nettles, tonight Juve, then you have Botheration tomorrow, ending with Rum and Wine. I am not in a celebratory mood. I'm extremely angry. I'm seeking my best, trying my best to contain myself, lest I explode. Because I cannot see how Guyanese could find the nerve in the light of what happened to our 19 children. And considering the pain that their parents would have felt, and those who've been injured, not just 19 people here, to find anything to celebrate about given what we're under in reference to this cloud of hypocrisy and demonic minds leading us as a people. I'm unhappy, Dr. Hines and guests. I'm extremely enraged. And I'm yet to hear a word from Sarah Lynch, well, she's gone, from anybody to say, how could the people have children living under these conditions? I've yet to hear anybody saying that if you cage children up like this and cage them, you should be tried in some court of law. You're not hearing that from the international community. But they could have said a lot about elections, though.
Pastor Apostle Nigel London and Amanza Desir offering some initial reflections on our independence. Of course, this is a free and independent space, and one should not be surprised to hear some views that are not quote unquote fake on this program. Dr. Nigel Westmont,
thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Hines, and thank you to fellow panelists. I think the Sister Manza and Pastor London have put it very well in terms of sobering reality of the current day and previous days, the horror of Mahdia, and where we are Independence Day. At a more broader level, they've said everything that I could say, and very well. At a larger level, we also need to take stock as a nation. Even, I think, Dr. Hines, you mentioned 57 years that we passed the Cold War and we passed a lot of stuff, but we still have the possibility and the promise of 1966 is still to be with us. Some of the reasons that were just mentioned, but others as well. We came out of independence with a lot of promise and hope, came into independence rather, but we came in the middle of a Cold War. We came in the middle of threats to our territorial integrity. We came in the midst of economic turbulence, and we came in the midst of a hope of a third world people, that we could show the world that we left behind slavery, left behind indentureship, left behind colonialism, and now we'll transform ourselves into a national nation, a nation of integrity and a nation of promise. Those things, those possibilities and promise have died long ago. I, like everyone else, would celebrate, I would say, the flag and anthem independence. I would celebrate the fact that we did cross a threshold and we do need to form unity. But in terms of the reality we have, I agree with Pastor London in terms of the limitations of independence and Republican status, not only for the reasons he gave, but also for the neocolonial history of the region, the control of foreign corporations, the instability of the world system, which we can't break as a small nation, and a number of other factors. But we can come back to those later. But I like them. I'm very sober on this day, and I even told Dr. Hinds that I'm not sure a program, on this day would be apt, but, I think we could do it with a soberness of reflection that was just expressed by all three of us now and yourself. Thank you.
And of course, when we became independent in 1966, in the middle of the Cold War, we were confronting a world order that wasn't created for us. When the victors of the Second World War met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and they came up with the New World Order fleet, the instance such as the IMF and the World Bank and what became known as the WTO, we did not exist. And so that world was not created for us. We had our own internal contradictions of different ethnic groups coming at different times in our history, colliding with each other during the period of colonialism. We had just come out of ethnic strife, 4 years of ethnic strife. And we also came into being with the breakdown of the West Indian Federation, which our country was not part of, but we were there in spirit. And so with all those challenges, taking the journey from plantation to nation ought to have been quite a daunting task for us, given all those local and regional and international challenges. I dare say that after 57 years, we're still here together, limping along as far as I'm concerned, and I share the sentiments of all three of you. We are here limping along. If there's anything to celebrate, it's the resilient Guyanese people of all classes, of all races, of all persuasions, who have kept this experiment together. And we don't always thank them. We always celebrate the leaders and which leader did this and which leader did that. And we don't always talk about what the people have done to hold together at least the promise of our independence. Dr. Westmus, you started off by talking about what is it we wanted in 1966. What is it? Given all the challenges that we face, what independence would have meant in 1966 from your own perspective as an activist, as a scholar, as a researcher?
Well, we first have to go back to the original impetus, to anti-colonial impetus of the country, or the colony as it was at the time. We had a lot of battles, of course, from slavery to indentureship and into the 19th century, late 19th century, into 20th century, battles of our people in rural and urban areas in terms of labor, in terms of land, in terms of land reclamation, in terms of protection of sugar, rice, bauxite, eventually. All of those things were part of our economic base and working people. We had a very strong working class society. We had Critchlow leading the movement in 1905 all the way up to the 1950s in terms of building a labor movement. And so we had a lot of promise. And then we have 53 with the birth of the 1950 People's Progressive Party, with, of course, the famous leaders, Burnham, Jagan, then Sidney King, and others who were part of the promise. They made mistakes. They anticipated poorly, perhaps, the wrong movement. They did not realize how strong the British were in terms of dividing the society. And so we had, as you indicated, a period where we had the promise of independence and we talked about it, but we were never really as a nation formed. So by the 1960s, when the negotiations with the British were continuing, and of course with the Americans who were behind the scenes, you had the shifting movements of, as you mentioned, ethnic division and political divide, albeit with both aspirants to the political power claiming they want full and free independence and they want society to be economically organized. But what happened, as you indicated, Mr. Common Chairman, we had the ethnic strife, and then we were fast forwarded into independence. We were not fully prepared as a nation. We did celebrate at the national park. We did have a perfect national anthem. We did have a flag. There was pride in the nation. We did, for 10 years after that, create a certain kind of hope. The civil service was intact. We had not as much immigration then as now, and we were formed as a nation in spite of the fractures and in spite of the colonial depredations and in spite of the fact that the nations were not formed to fight global capitalism in a strong way. But we did emerge a bit, tattered, as you mentioned, but as a nation. So I am, to put it in perspective, I would say we underline the fact that we came out bruised and not fully formed. We did achieve some things, but I think we're in a, as you can see today, I think the both speakers amplified what we are at today and many more things to talk about, but we're not fully gelled as a nation. For example, on a question of Madhya, I would assume in any nation that wants the prospects of full unity was that, the entire nation should mourn, it shouldn't be a political mourning, it should be a national mourning. And I thought that everybody should be involved. That would have given credit to everyone involved, apart from the Commission of Inquiry. And that would be a sense of how far we've come in 57 years. But alas, you can see the fractures, you can see the fissures, and you could see impending problems ahead.
Nigel, before I bring in our other two guests on that question of what independence would have meant, as you spoke, a Martin Carter poem comes to mind. Were some who run one way,
some run another way.
Some run another way. Have those lines or that line proven to be so true that today, you wrote that poem in 1962, right? This is 2023, 21 years. Were some who ran one way, were some who ran another way. Reflect, because I know you're a Martin Carter.
Well, I know there's some critics of Martin Carter, and that's fair. Everyone could criticize national poets or thinkers, but I think that one of the great attributes of Carter, apart from his poetry, is his discerning sense of this nation. I've seen not only that poem, but a lot of his prose and speeches, which kind of was prescient. In other words, they saw something in the nation that was weak. And those were the good old days. I mean, I say not the 60s, but the post-independence period when, we were emerged as a nation. There was a lot of hope. People are still talking about the kind of the activities that Stanley Graves wrote about recently, the glories of childhood, the glories of Guyana, the multi-ethnic mix, the ability to coordinate with Hindu, Muslim, Christian communities and see churches of all creeds around, and the growing up as people, young children and things, and the music. All of those things were there. But Carter saw something else. He saw, as you hinted, that we were not a people that were psychologically ready for independence. I can't put it any better way. And since then to now, I've seen iterations of that prescience being repeated over and over again in all kinds of forms. That is political, social violence, in the environment, in migration, the civil service collapse, the brutality of people to each other, which Martin Carter talked about as well, and of course the lack of public opinion in a sphere that could be democratic. We don't have that now. We have crosstalks and the slamming of people and throwing out everything they did in the past and bringing it into the future. It's just contradictions of those who were once embroiled in the same things they're complaining about, now speaking as if they're the new Democrats. They just discovered themselves, which is false and contradictory to the facts. So
Yes.
I would say you're right about Carter's prescience. I could say more about what he said, but he has really, really chronicled the decline of this nation very well at a very early stage.
Sister Manzo, yes, what independence would have meant as you understood it to be. You were, of course, a child of independence, very much a child of independence, more so than some of us who were born a little before 1966. What does it mean to you? And take liberty to reflect on Martin Carter's, were some who ran one way and some who ran another way.
I have always been inspired by our story of independence, and particularly as a young Guyanese. I don't think very often we stop to think just how young these men were and these women. They were all in their 30s, some in their 20s, and in the struggle for our independence. And so for me, I always sit back because people have to tell you, you're too young to do this. And I draw inspiration from that because it was these young men and women who led the way for our independence. When we became an independent nation, we took unto ourselves symbols of nationhood, things that said that we are now or ought to now be a nation um, in control of our destiny, as it were. You talk about the national pledge, you talk about the anthem, and these words were penned with such pride, with such an understanding that this dear land of Guyana, it has always been depicted as a mother where children salute you, you know, and it has always been depicted as a bountiful mother, dear land of Guyana, of rivers and plains, made, you know, and he speaks about the geography and the beauty of this nation. And for me, in my quiet time, I go through it and I reflect on it because, like we always say here, Dr. Hines, independence could be ours if we're willing to work for it. Freedom is ours if we're willing to work to keep it. And with freedom comes responsibility. This is not an ideal that is bestowed on you and by itself will evolve. It requires active tending and nurturing. And so, as a nation, I think we have to decide whether we are going to actively uh, tend to and nurture this independence. And what does it mean to do that? What does it mean to be a people who are free? Are we really free? And these are all the questions I think we as Guyanese, and particularly myself as a young Guyanese, we have to detain ourselves with, or else all that we do is in vain. And, you know, our song says, it is not in vain that we will strive to build this new Guyana great and free. So for me, independence means that I have to be committed to keeping the independence that our foreparents struggled and fought for. And what does that look like? It means upholding the Constitution. It means fairness. It means equity. It means equality. It means that as a citizen, irrespective of my political persuasion, I must be a vessel and a tool to ensure that not one of my brothers or sisters, not one of my Guyanese brothers or sisters, that we are oppressed in this country. That is what that means. You see, citizenship and the rights of citizenship come with a concomitant responsibility. We like to talk about human rights, and vis-a-vis the state, vis-a-vis our social interaction, it has a place. But what about our citizenship obligations? What about our obligation to speak up against wrong? when it's wrong, even if it's somebody you are affiliated with doing the wrong? What about our commitment as a people to say that there is no glory, there's no benefit in me seeing my brother suffer or my sister oppressed? That is what it means to be independent. And we're not yet 100 years there. And so we're struggling with the problems of infancy as it relates to finding our footing as an independent nation and as a democracy. But again, this is not a vehicle that drives itself. It is driven by the citizenry. It is driven by we the people. And it is we the people who have to determine the direction that it goes in. It is not about the leaders alone. The leaders are there to serve the people. And if the people do not stand up and say, this is not the nation we want, this is not the nation we want.
This is not the nation we want. Apostle London, let me bring you in. You, of course, registered some strong conclusions about the content and tenor of our independence, and you must have been measuring what you consider this independence against some expectations to have arrived at those scathing conclusions, which I dare say that I do share. Your understanding of what this project, this independence project, would have meant as we started that journey in 1966.
Thank you. When I think about Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham, and Chetty Jagan and the others, especially the two of them, I believe that those two young men had a very clear understanding of the day by those colonialists. And as a result, very rare I should say it is now to even think that that was possible. These two men agreed, even when they would have parted ways in reference to political dealings. Then listen, we have to own our economy. We have to take control of our resources, and we must have power of control, the power to control our economic well-being and doings. And guess what? We all know what happened, right? The same people who said you're free, you're independent, say you're a problem, because now you want to take back bauxite. You want to see you have control over. You want to change the name from Alcoa and Denver. You want to make it now Guyman in these places. No, we have a problem with you. And those who want to support false narratives cannot hide or run from the fact for long that Chetty Jagan was in agreement with Burnham, that we have to not just say we're independent because you have a flag and an anthem. You're independent when you have control of your economy, which is what the colonialists didn't want us to have, and they still do not want us to have. But further to that, I believe that they also want us to be a people who are independent thinkers. The kind of mind that Burnham would have allowed to be trained and to function in society and even abroad to represent us. They were independent thinkers. And what we have now, 50 plus years after that promise was made to us to make us independent, are, and I don't want to get a man's in trouble here, member of parliament, but we are surrounded by many people who are just lazy in reference to how they think. They would rather be thought for and thought about rather than being independent in their thought processes. And I believe that that promise, or the drive, or the fight to be independent then would have given in their minds the liberty to Guyanese to think about what a beautiful place this country can be if we are all free from the same master. Before independence, as they call it, Guyana had two men who understood, though they were African descendant and Indian descendant, with a Caucasian in the midst in Janet. They listen here. We have one single enemy to deal with. And if we can unite to deal with them, as a people, we'd be better off. And as they say my namesake would have said. Maybe they didn't think deep enough to see that those people saw that the only instrument that we can use, even though we say you're independent, to destroy you, is to make you think that you are now your enemies and we're your friends.
Nigel Rasmus, I have to bring you in here because I think Apostle London has taken us right there to the core of the issue. That you and I came in to active politics in the mid-1970s at a time when the concourse of ideas as to what the content and the tenor of independence meant. And I'm paraphrasing here the late Gordon Rollier, who said it became an argument between the fathers and the sons. Let me explain what I meant. Burnham, as education minister in 1953, presided over the reforms of our education that made it possible for the Walter Rodneys and the Gordon Rolliers to go to Queen's College and further on to postgraduate education. And they came back to the Caribbean, in Jamaica, in Antigua, in Trinidad, and in Barbados. And they're asking their fathers, is this independence still about a complete break with plantationhood? Or is it about reforming plantationhood? Whether it was Hector versus Bird, Rodney versus Burnham and Jagan, Monroe versus Manley and Seaga, Bishop versus Gary, there were that conflict was over what this brother has introduced there. Must independence mean control of our natural resources and our destiny? Or must it mean a watered-down version of colonialism? Nigel West must rescue me.
Well, you hit it on the head there. That father and son dilemma in all of the societies, but we have to put it in wider context of a world system. In looking back at that time, I realized too that even the younger sons and who were fighting, the Rodneys and the Monroes and others, the bishops, when they were articulating either a worldview that said we should be an independent third world country among a nation, third world, that was the time of the non-aligned movement, or we should be independent in the Marxist orbit, they were articulating a shift, as you said, from that pre-colonial conception of what independence should mean. Now, both of the quote-unquote the main leaders of the party, Burnham and Jagan, of the nation, so to speak, both of them articulated all the way a vision of independence as well, and economic independence as well. But what they didn't do is, I think, as you quite correctly pointed out, is take the things in the direction of a new political culture, one, and two, take the advancement of independence beyond, as Pastor London mentioned, the flag and anthem concept, into the area of rescuing the economy, uniting nations across the spectrum to deal with the international powers that be. You mentioned International Monetary Fund, you mentioned nationalization. But I think what happened is that even the young progenitors of those elders, the Manleys and others, the younger generation, could not foresee the real politic of the world. So in reflection, I think that we were up against it in terms of the world system. When I was at Binghamton University, there was a coterie of scholars called the World Systems Analysts or World System Perspective. And what they essentially say is that once there's a massive, historically laden international system that lasted for 400 years, that is transatlantic slavery, that built the economies of the West and made them what they are, that it's very difficult to dislodge them unless you have a unitary, another system that could confront that capitalist system, because everything was interconnected. The economy, as Pastor London mentioned, when you try to nationalize, they come against you. All of those things happened. So my perspective was that we did not understand the real politic of the world at that time, or the Rodneys and others, because the strengths were there on the other. Yes, there are flashes of brilliance. The Cuba, Grenada, countries in Africa challenged the status quo in Nkrumah in 1957, but quickly they were overthrown by the CIA or undermined or things. So the world system was so powerful that I think we underestimated it, and we're still underestimating the strength of global capitalism. And now we have Exxon. We'll be miserably underestimating the power of that reach, and it's destroying our society. I'm not saying we shouldn't go to Exxon, as some have been indicating. I agree that as a small nation, we need that resource. We have never had it before, but we can do it with a unified nation, not as a divided nation. And so far as I see, we have not pulled out that little pin that we aspired to from the beginning of the independence, the pin of reassembling political culture towards the end of total independence. We have not done that.
Amanzo,
No, I have let me say this.
Come right in.
I think this is where I think as a young person, my frustration lies. And I want to pivot off of what Dr. Westmas said. We are struggling to find that thing that will unify us. And I want to submit to us that we cannot ignore the power, the motivational and psychological power of the symbols that I referenced. In certain parts of the world, men die for their flag. And so, yes, we are in a situation where we're 57 years as an independent nation. But it is in those same things that we have to be careful not to discard, that I want to submit to us, that we will find our Guyanese-ness. And until we find it, we are but people wandering around in a wilderness.
Amanzo, let me ask you a straight question. You went straight to the Guyanese-ness. And the Guyanese-ness have some assumptions. You say until we find our Guyanese-ness. What is the path you envisage to that Guyanese-ness? Because Dr. Westmas argued that we are very much still a pre-nation, independent. Apostle London has pretty much said the same thing. Now, the Guyanese-ness, what's the path? Why in 57 years? And I go back to Martin Carter in 62. Were some who ran one way? Were some who ran another way? In 2023, are there some who are running one way and some who running another way? How does Guyanese-ness fits into that? With people running one way and running another way?
Leadership.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Leadership. It all rises and falls on leadership.
Okay. Talk to us.
If we are likening Guyana to a child,
yes,
a child needs to be succored. They need to be fed. They need to be nourished. A child has to be in a protected, as it were, space so that that child can become all that that child can be. And I believe that that is what we as citizens have to begin to focus on. Look, you see all of the geopolitics that Apostle London has pointed out and Dr. Westmas, they've pointed out, they're real. Mm-hmm. But the enemy without can never hurt unless there's an enemy within. That's an old African proverb. And everyone knows that the enemy within is our racial and ethnic division.
Have we spent enough time in 57 years in the 50s confronting that thing?
We have not. We have not. We have absolutely not, because the truth and the reality is that we have leaders in our politics who are content to exploit that. And so they now have taken the place of what used to be the massa, as we call it. Yeah. And so, let me say, these questions are deep questions that we are going to have to confront And I know I say some things that are not popular as a politician, but this is the space in which I choose to make my contribution.
We got your back. We got your back.
Just one comment there. The question is, Martin Carter again, we have leaders who follow from in front.
Yes.
Listen, unless you have a conviction in your spirit that this experiment called Guyana can work, you're really not fit to lead Guyanese. You have got to know in here, in your belly, that this is what we have. My foreparents came or were brought here shackled. Yours came, others came through indentureship, but we are here.
Yeah.
And we spend too much energy. We do not spend enough energy on figuring out what do we do now we are here. Now that we are here.
Yeah. And I think Amans, we hinted that in 66, the question of the outgoing masters, how are they going to treat with us? And we thought the way to deal with them was to try to stay alive and acquiesce to them. But they have come back in 2020. And in 2020, they came back, and the first thing they did, they cast our elections out the door and said, we shall choose. And we are still talking about free and fair elections and democracy. This is what this brother London is telling us. That thing in 2020, I know you were sitting in parliament as a result of 2020, but that thing was not an election.
No.
It was those who we thought we had thrown out of the door in 66, coming back in another guise and saying, we don't know about you, but we got some investment here that is even more than the investment on the sugar plantations 400 years ago. And we are not going to allow you to choose. We are creating an electoral college, as they did in the United States, where the popular masses still are not trusted to elect their leader there. We have a college, an electoral college here in Guyana that is threatening to choose our leaders from here on. Pastor London, come back in. I got to take a drink of water.
Of water.
Want to make that clear.
Thank you. I can see why. Well, Dr. Westmus is older than me, so he would have been Nigel before me. But I can see why we share the same name. I can see why MP Amans is a Lindoner, because I'm surrounded tonight or sandwiched between people who are unafraid and unashamed to speak how they feel. I'm speaking to what we're seeking to achieve, this true independence, must be looked at from the perspective of those who made us independent. In reference to what they said. These people have figured out a long time ago, up until now, and I'm referencing or referring to 2020 again. They know that Guyana has a basic problem, as most third world countries do. Even African nations have it. People who claim to want to lead do not want to be independent, they want to have power. And there's a huge difference. Many political figures in this country just want to be in office.
I think we've lost.
Somebody coming back, somebody trying to reach. They want to be in office. Just get me in. And once you get me in, then I'm fine. Let's forget about how you treat us. We do everything you want us to do as long as you get us in. An independent nation, should we become one, we would have the guts to tell the likes of Sarah and Lynch to get out. Lillian Chatterjee, with Charandas matter, should have been arrested because she did it on our soil. And let Trudeau come and tell us to release her because of whatever it is. Let's have a kind of conversation. if we are independent, then Simon should be able to walk into a voting center in the USA and say, I came to see what's going on here, and call the people and say, hold on here, because in Atlanta, for example, we had issues with voters and mail-in ballots. He should be able to go there and tell them to fix it. We're not independent, and it doesn't matter how much we try to say the word, we're not an independent people. Because at the end of the day, our own leaders are asking Massa to come and fix this problem so we could get in. That's why I say that I'm of the view that an independent Guyana would be free of the nature of two monsters that we've had to deal with for the past 50 plus years. We have two political giants in this country who are firmly, for the greater part, convinced that, hey, whenever these 5-year cycles approach, we have to revert to what works. And that's what Amanda spoke to. And I trust that tomorrow she will not get into trouble for saying what she said.
No, we got her back.
You bet. As long as they come try to touch her based on what she said tonight in reference to this matter here, because we have to have the conversation about ethnic division. Yes. That is what the US said. That's what the CIA said. That's what the UK leader said. We got them here because as long as we get them to believe that they have to be polarized, you go Indian, I go African, we have them where we want them. And for as long as we can have their leaders to function like that every 5 years, we have them where we want them too.
But I think
what I can say that now, sorry, Amanda, now what we have are weaker leaders who can't even do like Burnham and Cherry will try to.
I think there are conditions precedent that we have to concern and detain ourselves with. Nigel knows that the Bible said it is difficult to kick against the pricks. And I detain myself with, what are we doing with what we have to make the lives of Guyanese better? That is what I detain myself with. What are we doing with what we have? We have a constitution. What are we doing within that to make sure that the lives of every Guyanese, the life of every Guyanese is better? And so you talk about geopolitics and you talk about this tension with colonialism and neocolonialism. And it is not an inappropriate conversation, but it must not be the conversation that dominates and detains us. It is my view that this is what we have right now. Are we maximizing whatever we do have? Because sometimes the conversations that we're having about all of these external matters, they literally do take our energy away from what we can do right now to make the life of every Guyanese better. And I'm sorry, but that is where I choose to expend my energy. You see, everything that has been said here, they're valid observations. But what are we doing now? And that is where I choose as a citizen of this nation to expend my energy. It should not be that it discounts Apostles' views or discounts Dr. Westmaster's views or discounts Dr. Hinds's views. But this is where I choose to focus on, given the realities of the externals, how do we make that which we have now? How do we make it work? How do we nourish this Guyana child and have her grow up?
I'm very glad you've taken us there. And perhaps that is your role on this panel as the youngest person in the panel. But I don't know between you and Apostle.
And maybe as the female.
Well, and maybe as the female to take us there. And I want to throw the ball here in Westmaster's court because he, as a former radical or still a radical, certainly coming out of the radical tradition. And as he said, even the Rodneys, who are revered as brilliant radicals, and here's a son of Rodney saying that the Rodneys may have underestimated that thing that you were talking to us about, that geopolitics. And so I'm glad that you are taking us within the space that we have. What can be done within that space? Now, the followers of Jagan and Burnham would argue, especially the Burnhamites, would argue that Burnham was skillful enough to navigate the geopolitics and to get some things done in terms of social and economic reform in the 1970s and 1980s, which we're all looking back on now. And some of us are giving greater significance to it than we did at the time. Because looking at it from 57 years, when you look at what Manley was able to do in Jamaica, and Burnham did in Guyana, and Barrow did in Barbados, Williams in Trinidad, that at the time, we probably were too close to the theater to understand that they were doing this against the odds, right? And so here we are in 2023 with the same odds, probably even more extensive than they were back then. Where is the space to do some things that Burnham, Jagan, Williams, Manley, Barrow, etc. were able to do? Barbados retained the welfare state the longest in the English-speaking Caribbean without calling themselves socialists. Is there something to be learned from that? They never called themselves socialists, but up until recent, you were still traveling on the bus for free. The government was still paying for children to go to UE in Barbados. Now, we did the same thing here in Guyana and Jamaica and so on and so forth. But at some point, we had to abandon the welfare state. Barbados did not. And for a brief moment, the DLP tried to do that. And as Chambers said, not one damn seat for them. Because they tried to dismantle the welfare state. Within the context of our today, with new oil wealth, is there space, Nigel Westmus and Nigel London, to do some things that Amanza seems to be hinting at? Is there space?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge, I know a lot of mention was made of Burnham's ability to transcend or to deal with the West, but we must acknowledge in the early period, in the late 60s, he did kowtow to the West in terms of getting into office, partly, and he also changed his position. In the 1960s, the nation had socialism was still on the agenda of the People's National Congress, but at some point they made a calculation to get support from the West, and then they moved after that in 1970 to Republican status. And in other words, Burnham came back to his previous self. So I must acknowledge that. But in the context of what you're saying in terms of the ethnic, so the state, what space we have, that space was tried on many occasions prior. You mentioned my participation. It's no secret I was a member of the Working People's Alliance. We, in our struggles against the then Burnham regime, did put the nation to a point where we said we need unity, and we tried what is called multiracialism. But as somebody told us very soberly, there's no race named multi. Yes. And so we never got past that adventure, so to speak, to try to change the position, because the two ethnic giants broke it down. There are other tries. The People's Progressive Party and People's National Congress, which is forgotten now, did have talks. This is after the controversial 1973 elections. Did have talks in 1975 at Belfield between Burnham and Jagan and Janet and Narbada and company had three sets of talks about a national front government to confront imperialism, and that failed. And then you had the consequent arrival of Rodney and other issues which brought us up to the present.
But then again, they talked again in 1985.
Yes, and we had a national dialogue. That was a space. national dialogue was opened up. Even who were antagonistic to Desmond Hoyt, we said, okay, he has shown, they used to call him Desmond Prasad because he made alliances with the West, but he also made alliances with the Indian business class. But at the same time, he was open to dialogue. And so we said, let's seize it. And we tried, and there was talk and there was an opening, and that opening led to elections in 1992. But of course, after that, you know what again happened, that the WPA impetus and the civil society impetus did not change the political psyche of both of those behemoths. And they continued in as Pastor London said, the electoral cycle continuously, dominant electoral cycle all the way. And now we have another iteration of it. So the only space I could see is when Lincoln had taken office in when he had made the Gettysburg Address, when he had won, he said, with malice towards none. No regime in post-independence Guyana has taken that far, with malice towards none. Mahdia, bring the opposition leader, let's go to Mahdia and celebrate, not celebrate, but to mourn a national tragedy of the horrific nature. All of those little things could work towards dialogue and unity. No, it's not that. The question of constitutional reform, well, I call it, the only thing we can do now is constitutional revolution in order to bring a society where everybody will feel represented in parliament and not, I think Pastor London had a good conception of it earlier, we would just be segmented in idle talk in these bodies without any fundamental change. And then, of course, a civil society, independent civil service society. In other words, all of the embassies abroad and all of the local bodies. Pastor London mentioned if Sam Hinds could intervene in American elections. Well, I don't think even we could intervene in the embassies that are supposed to protect us, and this is both parties, protect us, to represent Guyanese, not represent the interests of the People's Progressive Party or the People's National Congress. If that shifts and you have a civil society that's independent, like some aspects of the court are doing now, some aspects of the court, to their credit, are taking independent decisions. If that kind of line could be continued, we'll have the space. But unless we move to that and we move to ethnic dialogue, not to say to deny blackness or deny Indianness, what we have now is a co-optation campaign in order to deny dignity of the other race by incorporating them with oil wealth into the embrace of another political party. That does not proceed unity. That is deliberate co-optation. That's what the Republicans do to say they put an African person in the Republican Party. They don't identify with Africans. They identify with the powers that be. So you have to have dignity with unity. If you don't have that, you will not have a change Guyana. And that is what this current bunch is doing in terms of using oil wealth to transform every single apparatus of the state, rather than trying to reach out with malice towards none to the other side once power is achieved in that form. And that is where we are.
With malice towards none, a revolutionary of the 70s quoting Abraham Lincoln. Oh, we are moving on. We are moving on. Pastor London.
Thank you. In reference to what MP Desiree would have spoken to, and of course, she's younger than I am, so she's the youngest in the room today. When we have got, or we should take the time to realize the true nature of our society. When Guyana would have taken loans, let me just go here and get myself in trouble. Gregory Quinn, the former British High Commissioner to this country, stood up and said something that I would have said to Granger would have been the most disrespectful thing anybody could say to me, and maybe I would have fought him physically. Gregory Quinn said, listen, with all the money we give you all for sugar to help you, the grants we give to you, by now you're supposed to decriminalize homosexuality. That's what the man said. Now, I don't know how much disrespectful anybody could be to Guyanese people. To say that, listen, we give you money to help you in the sugar industry, but you're supposed to go and legalize homosexuality. It showed me then, among many other instances, that listen, as long as you receive aid or grants or take loans from the West will tell you how to govern your economy. So when we say, let us work with what we have is control that's external. And if you control externally, but that's what neocolonialism is about, how do we as a people within here work? Worse is when we have political figures, as I said, the weak bunch now, we're saying, listen, we have to do what they say. or they're going to take us out like they did in reference to what people see they did to Granger. So hold on. In order for us to get along and do well and enjoy the oil wealth and ensure that our friends and families and cronies get a lot of money, we are going to turn our backs on the average Guyanese person, and we're going to look towards the West and other places to control us while we remain in power. What we have to work with as Guyanese people, maybe 40 or 50% of the society saying we had enough of all of this nonsense here that we call politics in this country, and we just want to wash out what we call politics and reform. That's why I speak to independent thinking. Reform our minds to say, somebody like MP Walton Desir could talk to me, where she's saying, no, we have to have a conversation about what's happening ethnically in our country. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the fact that we have leaders now who are deliberately seeking to empower one group of people to the detriment of another. And there's no nice way to put it. Let's have that kind of conversation. Because if we don't have the type of conversation, we don't have a corresponding action and reaction to that kind of conversation, what do we have to work with? What we have to work with now in Guyana are people who are afraid of the Guyana police force because of Jagli and others. What we have to work with in this country are people who, for example, like Norton, who said that if he were to lead a group of Guyanese on the streets of Georgetown, the PPP will pay people to come and burn people building down so we can't go on Georgetown. That's what we have to work with. A weakened society. What we have to work with are when bulldozers are knocking houses down in Makkah, we just go afterwards and say, how could you all do this to people? Because nobody wants the blood to run down their faces in this country. That's what we have to work with. So maybe the day will arise when our people will say that what we have been working with is destroying us. So we get rid of everybody and deal with people differently. We'll only have those who are willing to die for us.
Amanzo, the ball is in your court. You took us there.
No, listen. And let me tell you why I like conversations like these. You have 4 panelists. Our views converge in places and they diverge in others. And I think that is the essence of what we are trying to achieve. Yeah. And I might disagree with what you say, but I will fight for your right to say it. Yeah. You know? And you know, I like being the youngest in the room very often. Nigel knows that it says, what is hidden from the wise and the prudent is revealed to the babes and the sucklings. So I have no difficulty with being the young in the room. But I'll say this. I'll say this, gentlemen. I love this discourse.
Yeah.
I love the discourse. I love that we are able to come to a place to say, this is how I feel. You mightn't like it, but this is how I feel. And this is the type of work that we have been running from as a nation, because I don't agree with what you say and I ostracize you and I cast you out. Right. You are entitled to your viewpoint. I am entitled to mine, and I am entitled to express it. And I think that is the most basic of starting points that we need to accord each other in this nation. Some of the things that Nigel said I don't agree with, but he has a right to say it. And if I am talking about being a nation and a democracy, I will defend his right to say what he has to say and what he wants to say. You see, and I think
you have to say they in terms of 2 Nigels. So
I'm sorry, I'm speaking about Dr. Apostle Nigel London. But this is what is true. We have to respect not the person, but the whole of the person, and that includes respecting rather their opinions. You cannot speak about respecting a person without respecting their opinions. And there is something like we agree to disagree with malice to none.
Yeah.
And so the next step has to be, what binds us together? What do we agree on?
Right.
Yeah.
What are the things that we agree on?
I join in your court. Pastor London seems to be saying to us, wow, I got to search. Nigel Westmus basically said, "Oh boy, I searching even with 2 glasses, and I ain't see him. Talk to us, Amanzo.
What is it? What is the common thing that we all want? What at a fundamental level do we all want? And if we could find that thing that binds us together, that common ground, we can agree on everything. We are distinct as human beings. My fingerprint is not yours. My opinions will not be yours. But at the end of the day, we agree on the fact that I want my children to grow up in a safe Guyana.
And then it moves to what are we doing to make that possible?
What are we doing to make it happen? So we have to identify what is common to us as parents, as brothers, and as sisters. We want a safe community. We want to be able to go to work and work with dignity. We want to be able to not have to depend on handouts. I want to be able to, as a woman, as a man, stand in the fullness of who I am, being acknowledged for my contribution. It is a human need.
Yeah.
And if we find that common ground, I tell you that which unites us is far greater than that which divides us. And that is the work that we have to begin to do as this nation, and not discount our opinions, but find the things that we agree on.
Are there optimistic signs? Are there optimistic signs, sis?
You know what? Hope springs eternal again in the breast of youth. Again, the benefit of being young, maybe. For me, I remain optimistic because every day I go out in the community and I meet young people like myself, and they say to me, MP, man, we just want to live. We just want to support our families. We just want to know that, I could go to a hospital and not have to wait for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. We just want to know that if there's a fire, our young people are not going to lose their lives because of incompetence.
Amanzo,
want. And so for me, yes, Doc.
You belong to a political party. I know Nigel and I are associated with another political party. Pastor London may be the odd man out here. He's not a part of that. But isn't the political party a limitation to this kind of liberated space in which we are having this call? Perhaps isn't a space like this where we remain members of our party, but our party release us to come into spaces like these and to begin to have that conversation in which we're not looking for votes. You see? Now, when you take Madhya, for example, I mean, you have the NDC and you have the PNC reps and the PPP reps and the GAP reps and all them there, I imagine. You mean none of them could not tell the central government that you have a dormitory there with no safety for children, that children could die in a dorm? You mean none of them could tell the central government that? But no, because if you go, you will not win one vote by saying we were able to get a dormitory with fire detectors. That don't win you vote. And so that human element that you're talking about there is not part of a political party discourse. No. If you build a stadium, you will get votes because you build a stadium in Palmyra. And so you're saying to the people around there that, they're bigger, they can see it. You build a big road, you build a big bridge. But safety of children in a dormitory don't win you votes. And that's why those 19 children die like dogs there, because our political culture does not protect them. Over to you, Amanzo Desir.
I have never needed to ask permission from anyone to speak on anything that affects my fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters. So I don't subscribe to this having to have leave.
But in saying that, what I mean is to...
No, I understand. Space, eh? No, right. I understand. I understand. So that's the first point I want to make.
Right.
The other point that I want to make is that this is why these conversations are important, and we may not see the fruits of it tonight, and we may have to deal with people who are going to try to dissect it like they did when you and I were in a program to ascribe certain motivations to us. But let me tell you what I live with: the fact that history will absolve me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would have given my best from my heart. Nothing else matters to me. So we can be unpopular sometimes. We may have to stand against some people that we are comrades with and so on sometimes. But this is what we have to do if we are going to see, this Guyana united and free that we talk about. This is not talk, gentlemen. This is not talk. You look at the Western countries that we like to go to for the standard of living and the ease of living. This wasn't bestowed on them. However they got it, it was through an active process of participation. And for all of the ills that they have, they're not perfect. You see some foundational things in place. And unfortunately, here in Guyana, we are at the window dressing stage, and we haven't tended to the foundation. And the good apostle will tell you that the wise man got to tend to his foundation. We're not tending to the foundational stuff in Guyana. We are not. Imagine, as you said, a president could not reach across the aisle to a leader of the opposition and say, look, this is a national tragedy. You look at these same Western countries that we criticize. When the hurricanes blew, President Joseph Biden was down there with Ron DeSantis. They're political rivals. But there has to remain a realm that is inviolable when it comes to our humanity. And we are losing that here. And it is for the people of Guyana, the right thinking people who can say, hey, hold up. We're going down a road that will lead to our destruction if we cannot get band together in a tragedy. What will bring us together as a nation? And so these programs are important. Sounding our voices.
Sounding our voices.
Yeah.
We agree. Dr. Jagan talked about the Western trial. And our independence is on trial. And I think these reflections here tonight have opened up, I hope, space for another round of discussions to make real the promise of independence. Nigel Westmus, Nigel London, and Amanza Desir, your closing thoughts. Starting with you, Dr. Westmus.
Okay, thank you, David, and thanks for the discussion. I really enjoyed the two panelists and yourself and this very important discussion of self-reflection on National Independence Day. And again, I salute national independence, even though I critique the state in which we're at. I think Sister MP hit it on the head when she talked about both other panelists hit it on the head in different ways. Pastor London mentioned earlier the question about fear and struggle. In other words, people not the ability to go and proclaim your space in the streets or wherever. There's a letter, go to your MP, but make it visible and very visceral. That's one thing. The second aspect of it is the struggle for the civil society space, which Mr. MP has pointed out. In other words, that common ground dignity, which we seriously lack in Guyana, and has lacked for a long time. In other words, on a national issue like flooding, or the Madhya horror, or environmental things, or Exxon spill, for heaven forbid, those things should reflect in a national response, not a career enhancing or party enhancing moves. in the national sphere to gain recognition, but bring people together. That is so powerful. It's powerful for the people who do it. What they don't understand is that actually it works in their favor to reach out. It actually gives them more glow, right? Yeah. But they don't see, they're so narrow-minded. It's unbelievable. And we are 57 years after independence, and still we don't have a concept of civil society independence. Now, I'm up here, I'm out of the country. I'm one of those people who can tell the colonial people that I am here because you were there, which, in other words, I'm out here because you were there. And you dislocated our society, and I'm out here. I don't begrudge you. You guys are on the ground, and I speak with humility when you have to deal with the daily crisis. So I'm speaking from that angle. But the other diaspora conference, and the diaspora sends money, it does all kinds of other things, and sometimes the diaspora is thrown aside because of the fact that boots on the ground when, as Pastor London said, the U.S. ambassador seems to have more power than even a diaspora person when the time is ready, and they're really diaspora. Anyway, so the final word is that I think that we need a combination of struggle, of deep ongoing struggle at all levels. It works. It worked under the worst times in slavery. It worked under the worst times in indentureship. It worked in the pre-colonial movement. It worked in the post-colonial movement. I was part of it. David was part of it in different political spheres. We struggled on the streets, like UG, everywhere. Locked up for a couple of days, everything. Full works. And at the end of it, you might not like what came out of it, but you struggled. And this current generation, the younger one, must take up that struggle. If something is going wrong at UG and the chairs are bad, and you complain and it doesn't be fixed in 2 weeks, then take the chairs out and I don't want to say what else to do, or do something else. But don't stop there. Don't stop there. Take it to the final conclusion. And that's where we need as a nation. We need the combination of aspiring for that space that David talks about, but to get there, you have to struggle in the way that Pastor London mentioned. And so on that note, sympathy again to all of the horrors of the families who suffered at Mahdia, and happy Independence Day. Thank you.
Pastor London?
Thank you, and thanks to my fellow panelists. I'm certainly grateful. I'm happy that the Member of Parliament, Madam Nazir, could have echoed or maybe say that which is really fun to me, which is that I love disagreement. I don't love disagreement for stupid reasons, but I love having different viewpoints, and that's what Guyana should be. Guyana can only become better if people are at liberty to think, as I say again, independently, which would then lend itself to disagreements. I understand that there's a common cause. What I do know and take note of is the fact that this regime called the PPP has no intention of this country being united, none whatsoever. And I don't mind what political flowery seasoning we try to put in it. They have absolutely no intention of uniting Guyana for the betterment of all Guyanese. What they have the intention of doing is controlling Guyana's economy so that they and their friends can remain in absolute power. What is careful to note in this broadcast, and I'll be called a PNC tonight, I guess, afterwards, is that they do intend, and they will actually become worse. If ever an election is had in this country, and they have, let's say, 10 more seats in the House of Assembly, this country would not be anything close to what any Guyanese want to be in. Because we have a clan who are hell-bent on destroying the fabric of unity in this country. Finally, I say this. Burnham and Jagan, their names must be mentioned. When Jagan was called the opposition leader, he said, I agree with Mr. Burnham that we must have control of our economy. He said, I'm prepared to work with him for us to see this be a reality. You can't talk like that. And unfortunately, I don't see political leaders now at the top of the helm being prepared to speak in that manner. And this, my friends, would not lend itself to the average young Guyanese having the joy of being Guyanese. What it would do is, after a while, as I'm seeing here in Linden, I'm on the ground here, what I'm hearing from many young people in Linden is, we got to eat. So they don't care who's in power now. They're those who tell me to my face, I am against PPP. That's what they tell me. But I got to eat. So I put on a red shirt and I'll go and I'll say I'm one of them. And I get a contract. That's our reality. In Linden, I don't know anywhere else. So for the young people, for the youths of this nation, to have to cower to that extent so that they can realize the dream of being better off, it doesn't lend itself to national unity. It lends itself to the weakening of the manhood that should be found in our boys and our young men. And for that I will fight. For that I intend to fight with everything in my body to ensure that the youths of this nation understand that their forefathers died being men.
Amanzo?
I'm so deeply grateful for this discussion tonight, and I hope that it is something that we can continue to have. I love how Dr. Westmas was able to really describe that common space and to show how really we all want the same thing, and how it's a question of timing and how we do what we do. For me, when we talk about our young people being lost, it's because we have failed them. And we have to own that. We might not have spoken enough. We might not have cried aloud and spared not. We might not have paid the attention that they needed in order to say, look, this is who I am as a man, as a woman, as a Guyanese man, as a Guyanese woman. This is what I bring to the table, and this is what I expect as a citizen. We do not have in this country people who understand the power of citizenship and the power of the vote. We still are battling with mindsets that say that say to us, I am better off if the man or woman in State House looks like me, even if I cannot feed my children at night. And so we're talking about the shackles being removed from our hands and our feet, but they're still, to an extent, on our minds. And the only way for that darkness to be dispelled is if we bring light, the light of conversation, the light of offending in our perspectives, but at the end of the day, not leaving offended. All of it is possible, Doc. All of it is possible. And for me, I am eternally optimistic. I love this quote by Amanda Gorman, for there's always light if we are brave enough to see it. And if we are brave enough to be it, we have to be the light.
Thank you very much, sister. And I am glad that you all have committed to continuing this discussion in one form or the other. And there are so many comments in the comment section that point in that direction. Roy is saying, I'm enjoying this discussion tonight. Very interesting, David. And there are so many other comments that point to, you know what amazes me about this exercise that I've been doing now for the last 2 years and more is the capacity of our people. The capacity of our people to grasp the larger picture. Often we think that we have to break things down for them. Yeah, what I've learned on this program is they gotta break things down for we. Because sometimes I forget a date. And in 1 minute, 5 people give me the date. And I'm supposed to be the trained historian who should have the dates. The capacity of our people that they could appreciate on an Independence Night, this kind of discourse, which is not red meat. You know, it's not the red meat story. It's really, as we said, reflections on our independence, and we come at it from all over the place, because like jazz, like the blues, like our calypso and reggae, there's no musical rules, right? This reggae is a half card music. Somebody hands slip, and it becomes reggae, because we have to be constantly adjusting ourselves to when the breeze blow. Right? And I think that is something our people in their day-to-day habitat understand, because they gotta make it happen every day. They go to bed at night at 10 o'clock and they're already thinking about 8 o'clock in the morning. And so I am glad that we have come to some kind of consensus here, and there is also consensus from those who are viewing the program tonight that this kind of conversation is extremely important, to make us sane again. I want to thank you all so very much for coming on tonight, and to say we have survived another year, and let the new year that is coming be a more searching year, so that 1 year later we can see fruits that might be there, buried deep within our Guyanese belly. But we got to bring it out and hope the next year we can begin to lay down some new markers. Thank you all very much again. And to you, our audience, love is the watchword. You're human beings. That's what they said here tonight. We all are human beings, and we've got to put the human in our politics, Well, on Sunday night, we're going to have the open word with Professor Clive Thomas. He's going to be talking about oil at 7 o'clock on Sunday night, so look out for that program. And I'll be back here on Monday for another week of Politics 101.